If anyone has any questions about the Rebbe, Nosson, Bressler, what it's all about, want to ask a question before we start?
Was Reb Nosson Paul Yeshua? Was he one like Reb Nachman who did these things?
Rabbi Nachman called him Yehoshua. My Yehoshua, my Yehoshua. Like Moshe Rabbeinu had a Yehoshua, Reb Nosson was to Rabbi Nachman like that Yehoshua. Like Moshe Mitoch oil, he never left Rabbi Nachman's tent, Rabbi Nachman's towering figure over him. He always stayed there. That's how he became Reb Nosson, a towering figure unto himself. Because he stayed with Rabbi Nachman all the time.
Actually, somebody asked me to ask you a question, just fact-checking, since you're the expert on Reb Nosson.
Wow.
Is it true that Reb Nosson was trying to be Mekarev himself to some other tzaddikim after the Rebbe passed away?
That's what I heard.
Specifically, maybe the Kotzke?
I don't know. No, he met the Kotzke a few years before he passed away. Not the Kotzke, the Tzanzer.
The Tzanzer, okay.
He met him a few years before he passed away. But I heard that B'Shem Reb Gedalia Koenig, that first year after the Rebbe passed away, the Reb Nosson was looking for the tzaddik. Who's the tzaddik now? And he went to various tzaddikim to see if they would be the tzaddik.
It's not written in your name or not or something? It doesn't mention that?
No. This is a very controversial, I won't say controversial, it's a very questionable. I could feel that it's right. I could feel, it's just, you feel it's right or not. Nosson looks for the tzaddik. Because Reb Nosson, the Rebbe, in lesson 61, the Rebbe speaks about there are people who are great tzaddikim and they don't have faith in themselves. And I can imagine Reb Nosson not feeling that he could take over the helm of what the Rebbe started. So I could see Reb Nosson, or I can understand that Reb Nosson would shy away from taking over the mantle of leadership of what Breslev Hasidus is all about. In Yemei Maranat, he does write that I was there, and it was about a year after the Rebbe passed away, and I realized that it depends on me. That's what Reb Nosson writes in Yemei Maranat. That he went to others, I heard it B'Shem Reb Gedalia Koenig, and I could imagine it happening. I can't say for sure it happened. Right? I haven't heard it or seen anything about it.
I've seen it written somewhere.
In the book Fire and Water, you read it?
Yes.
That's where you saw it. That was the first time that ever found print. I didn't bring my bow tie.
You're excused. Just because you came here the first or second Shabbos. So yeah, you have a special waiver.
I have a little bit of that.
Did Reb Nachman want Reb Nosson to set it up the way he did, meaning that there would be no real, quote, Rebbe, and that in the future there would only be Reb Nachman?
Reb Nosson Well, Rabbi Nachman kind of gave smicha, not the smicha that we know it today, but he crowned Rabbi Nosson as his Talmud to carry on the torch. Shalom, yes. Well, how do you get him up?
Coming soon.
Oh.
Not me, but
Shimmy told me something. I saw him Shabbos.
Sometimes I have to tell they hear it first.
It's all right. In 1974, I went to Uli. The trip was the way it was. When I came back, people told me stories of what I did and how I snuck in and how I did millions of things. They told me things that I never heard of. So don't worry about it. You're not the first. Reb Nosson was imbued with a knowledge and understanding of Rabbeinu Zal, Rabbi Nachman, more so than anyone else. And his understanding of Rabbi Nachman is what made him remain a student and not become a Rebbe after him. In the Chayim Aran, there's a small sikha, a short sikha, I shouldn't say small, short sikha, where Rabbeinu Zal talks about the Baal Shem Tov, and he said the Baal Shem Tov started something, but it petered out. The other tzaddikim, his talmidim, told us, the Maggid of Mizrach, others, they started something, but it petered out. Right? I want to make something that will continue. That my talmidim should make more talmidim, and their talmidim should make other talmidim. Right? Notice this what Nachman Borstein pointed out in a lecture once. He said, notice that the Rebbe said talmidim, not Rebbe. Whereas what happened in all the other Hasidus, that there became, well, we need a Rebbe, you become the Rebbe, and you become the new guy. No. Reb Nosson, he writes this in Kutei Aloha, Zichul Shluchim. He writes about how the tzaddik, the main thing about the tzaddik is his Torah, and how his Torah lasts. The Torah is alive by you. It's Rashi in this week's parsha. It shows you the greatness of Reb Nosson, but the tzaddik gave over his Torah. As long as you accept the Torah of the tzaddik and you follow through with the Torah of the tzaddik, then you feel the tzaddik as still being alive. He's never dead. Look at the Baruch. Right?
Well, they're the only ones I know who follow,
Brest.
I would say, the Breslov pattern. They're
Right.
That's the only Hasidus that I know. Maybe there's others, but in several hundred years, it's the only one I'm aware of.
The others are getting a wind of it because the Rebbe passes away. Take a look at Boviv. You know, the kids are fighting over who's in charge. Told us Sarah has it. Whatnot. Eventually, they'll all get to that understanding. Right?
They all have money. They all have a reason to fight.
Huh?
They all have money. They have a reason to fight. The rest of them have no money. There's nothing to fight over.
There's enough fighting going on without money.
But is this what Reb Nachman wanted? The pattern? Is this what he desired?
I can't tell you. I never met him in the flesh
But, I mean,
to ask him if this
in
is
his
what he
writings,
wanted or not.
Do we have any indication of that in his writings? Or not really?
No, not that I know of.
So it sounds like this is unique to Reb Nachman's personality, what happened.
You would need a Nosson personality, yes. Yes. We'll talk about it now. Okay. Shalom. It's good. It's a good way to start the evening, okay? If anyone is familiar with this week's Parsha, it's a very interesting Rashi based on the Gemara and Tainus. Vayesaf Yaakov Raglav El Hamita. Yaakov gathered his feet onto his bed. Vayigva, and he passed on. Vayeyosef Elamav. That he was gathered unto his soul was gathered on. And Rashi points out, it's the Gemara and Tainus, that Misa lo nemar boy doesn't say Yaakov Avinu died. Right? V'yamru Rabbeinu Yaakov Avinu lo mes. Yaakov Avinu did not die. Okay? Now the Gemara asks, but they eulogized him, they embalmed him, and they buried him. What do you mean he didn't die? Right? Well, the Gemara says, I think it was Mנחem bar Yitzchak, he says, Lo, mikra ani darish. This is what the Gemara says. I'm quoting you from a pasuk. The pasuk says, right, I'm going to gather in Yaakov, right, and Bnei Yisrael. Says, Mahem b'chayim, af Yaakov b'chayim. That's what the Gemara says. I'm not doing it from seichel, from understanding. I'm doing it, pasuk says, Yaakov's children are alive, Yaakov is still alive. That's what the Gemara says. The Zoya says the same thing. Yaakov Avinu lo mes. Then the Zoya says, not only just Yaakov Avinu, but all the tzaddikim, they don't die. So the Zoya right away asks, the Zoya at the end of Parshas Truma, Vayomos Sham Moshe Eved Hashem. What do you mean? Yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't die. It says he died, right? What does it mean? Zoya answers, Misitra Dilon. From our side, it's considered as if he died. From his side, there's no death. Okay? This is what it says about the tzaddik. So, is Rabbi Nachman alive today?
He was Torah.
Oh,
He's alive through his Torah.
he's alive through his Torah, but he's alive. Or is he dead? Right?
More alive now than when he was
Huh?
More alive now than when he was alive.
Well, he's more well known now. Oh, yes. Okay. So let's take Reb Nosson. Reb Nosson is Moridik in this. And he brings the Rashi at the end of Parshas Vayelach. Moshe Rabbeinu says to Klal Yisrael, Ki yadati, achrei moisi, ki hashches tashchisun. After I die, you're all going to go off the path. Rashi quotes the Medrash. I'm saying where Rashi says it to make it easier for you to look it up if you want. You don't have to go look through all the Medrash. But the Medrash says, what do you mean, Acharei Moisi, after I die? The Pasuk says, the people served Hashem kol yimei Yehoshua, Yavod ha'omes Hashem kol yimei Yehoshua, v'chol yimei Azkenim, Asher ha'arichu yomim acharei Yehoshua. So for a couple of generations, the people did not go off the path. What did Moshe Rabbeinu mean by saying, after I die, you're going to go off the path? Right? Says Rashi, calls man shetalmidei shalodim kayam, as long as the student of a talmid, of a tzaddik is alive, it's considered as if that tzaddik is alive. Right? Clear? Any questions on that? Yeshua and Zkanim, Reb Nosson says, take a look. What is the real value of a tzaddik? You can go see him in the flesh, nice. You can go ask from him advice, nice. Right? You can go eat his shirayim at a tish, nice. But is that what the tzaddik is there for? Or the tzaddik is to teach you how to serve Hashem? How to use your strengths and power to serve Hashem? So that the main part of the tzaddik is the teachings of the tzaddik, the Torah of the tzaddik. That is the most important thing of the tzaddik. And when his teachers live on, the tzaddik lives on. If we fulfill the Torah, so Rabbeinu Zal is very alive, very much so. Same thing with all the tzaddikim. The Beis Yosef, he wrote a Shulchan Aruch, there's a Gemara, says the Roman emperor said to Rabbi Yeshua, I'm bigger than Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, why? Because he's dead, I'm alive. Rabbi Yeshua says to them, could you decree that nobody lights a fire for 3 days? He says, yeah. He decreed nobody could light a fire in the city of Rome for 3 days. That evening, Rabbi Yeshua takes him up on a mountainside, and he sees smoke coming out of someone's house. So he goes down to the house, he says, you deserve the death penalty. I, as king, decreed that nobody should light a fire. And hey, you lit the fire. He says, what can I do? My wife is very sick, she needs hot water. And if I didn't cook the water, so she'd be dead. So I had to light the fire. Rabbi Yeshua says to him, you made a decree, one day people couldn't stand with that decree. They violated your decree. Moshe Rabbeinu decreed, don't light a fire on Shabbos a few thousand years ago, and nobody lights a fire. The tzaddik is alive. Reb Nosson understood that. Reb Nosson's greatness in the Avnei Basel, it's brought that Rabbi Nachman had some very, very great tzaddikim. Rabbi Yudel was older than him, and he was a Mekubal when he came to Rabbi Nachman. And others were like that. Others, Rabbi Yudel was his name. Rabbi Yudel of Medvedika. And there were others like Rabbi Yudel who were older than Rabbi Nachman, and they came to be students of Rabbi Nachman. And they could have been maybe Rebbes unto themselves, but what's written there in the Avnei Basel is that these tzaddikim who were Rabbi Nachman's students, Rabbi Nachman is a great, he's my Rebbe, but they retained a little bit of their own understanding of how to serve Hashem. Rabbi Nosson, when he became a Talmud, says, here's somebody who's so great, I am nothing. He put aside his entire learning, his entire understanding, and with that, he was able to receive more of Rabbi Nachman than anyone else. Rabbi Nosson, when he came to Rabbi Nachman, knew entire Shas, Shulchan Aruch, Russian. He knew it all. He was 22. He knew it all. But he put all his understanding aside. What Rabbi Nachman gives me, now I have a little das. Now he gives me a little more, now I have a little bit more das. Everything is based on Rabbi Nachman. And that's how Rabbi Nosson was able to pull out teachings of the Rebbe and how he was able to make Breslev Hasidus today. What we have today in Breslev Hasidus is all due to Reb Nosson. Are there any questions on this? Any other questions on Reb Nosson?
Why is it that?
Huh?
Why is it when
Why is it? I have a hearing loss.
Why is it?
I should be wearing my hearing aids, but I'm not. Okay, go ahead.
Why is it that when a Muslim says something, it's considered as Breslev? He was not to נחlem himself.
No,
So why is it every word that he said considered as Breslev?
because what he took from Rabbi Nachman, whatever he had himself, was all due to Rabbi Nachman. It's all like an extension of Rabbi Nachman. It's the tzaddik who taught and the student who learned. But what is the learning of the student if not the tzaddik? Okay? When Yeshua got up to speak after Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, everybody knew that whatever Yeshua is saying came from Moshe Rabbeinu. They never questioned it. They never questioned Yeshua. Is this what Moshe Rabbeinu said? Is this what he wanted? That never happened. You also have it in Gemara, in a sense. But the Gemara is in Yevomas, or a few other places. Gemara says that somebody once said a halacha and didn't mention Rabbi Yochanan, the Rebbe, the master of the Shmuel. And Rabbi Yochanan was very angry. Was ikpid. He says, why was he makpid? Because you're supposed to say something over a Shmuel in somebody else's name, and it's of Dovis Bekeva. Right? So one of his Talmidim said, but everybody knows whatever he says is in your name anyway. Right? It's all you. With that, he was placated. It's in Gemara Yevamos, right? It's Tzadik Vov, if you want to check it out. Okay? So there, why everything Reb Nosson says is Rabbi Nachman, that's Brest. It is Brest. You're always challenging me, Yossi. To be a challenge.
Rabbi Rietti's there. I'll leave it for him.
Yes.
How far along is the translation of the Kudi Halakot?
Not very far, but Baruch Hashem, we found a template that we could work with. We had maybe 12 to 15 trials of how it would work. We finally found a way that the Likutei Halachos can come out. So we have a couple of pieces translated already, but it's really the beginning. There's going to still be trial and error, but we hope by the summer we'll have a volume. We hope so. We hope so. If anyone wants to support it, it's even better.
How far along is the Hebrew translation of the English Likutei Moharan?
The Hebrew translation, no, we're almost finished with the first part, the Likutei Moharan, the whole Chelek Aleph.
You're up to
Volume test.
So there'll be
We're
more
up to volume test. What happened is the fellow who was doing the major work of it lived in Amona. Amona is a village in the Yehuda in Shomron, which the government decided it belongs to the Arabs. So they threw everybody out of the village of Amona, and he was forced to, right after that, his wife broke her pelvis. So she couldn't work or move for a few months. So we've had a lot of manias and whatever. It's something that we are used to. We in Brest of research, we understand that we have a major enemy that tries to stop us from doing our work. His name is Satan. And we're dealing with the top general, right? And we've had this many times before in our nearly 40-year history of bringing out the Rebbe's firm. I should write a book. I'm not going to, but I should write a book on all the manias that we had, right? We brought this book to press, the printing press broke, right? We brought this back, finally we got it printed, the bindery broke, and or the sewing machine broke, or the this broke, or the that broke, or one after the other. Something that we're used to, right? And because we're now finishing the first part, the Kuta Moran, it's a bigger opposition. So
That would be which volume?
volume test.
Test final.
9. The last will be three more volumes. We're hoping.
To complete the whole thing.
Right? But again, you have to have people who could work. The guy is a good worker. He does the job right. The Hebrew is correct. Things work properly. So we're going to stay with him. But we have to work with him too. Like he has to work with us. We have to work with him. So, ask. Holy Shalom Aleichem. Ask.
This week, on one of the groups, they've been passing around the picture, which is just very inspiring every time you think about it. What Reb Noson's specialty was a little video going around of what was said to be one of Reb Noson's watches, like a chain watch, one of these clocks given to him by his Talmud. It says Isaac, by some.
Don't
Isaac,
remember, I never saw the picture. So.
But maybe tell us a little bit how he utilized every second of his life. I mean, I know that was his specialty. Tov Kif Tzadik Tes, yeah, it was given to him in Shnas Tov Kif Tzadik Tes.
Could be. I don't know the story, so I can't tell you.
No, not the story about that particular clock, just the whole.
The Rebbe Reb Zusha of Anapoli, one of the greatest tzaddikim that ever lived, said, I am prepared to give an accounting before Hashem for every single day of my life. I'm prepared, except for a day of travel, except for a day when he traveled. Because in travel, as I know, nothing ever goes the way you expect it to go. Whatever. Reb Noson said, when he heard that statement from Reb Zusha, he says, I am prepared to give an accounting for my life, even on a day of travel. Even for a day of travel. The Shach, Shulchan Aruch, the Shach was awesome. He wrote a tremendous amount, and he was 42 when he passed away. So it's not as if he had 60, 70 years to write. He was 42. And he wrote a tremendous amount, and they asked how was he able to write that amount. He said because he had hashba'as hakulmus, the pen, the quill that he used, right? And remember, in those days they didn't have a computer or even a ballpoint pen or even a pen with ink. They used to have a quill to dip into the inkwell every few letters in order to be able to write. And the Shach said that he had hashba'as hakulmus. He made the quill, he took it with an oath, a shvua, that it should move. So he was able to write quickly and whatnot. Reb Noson said, if you ask how I was able to do what I did, it's because because I guarded every second of my life. Every second was dear to me, and I made sure that I utilized it, every second. Reb Nosson, when he came to the Rebbe, realized that life is very precious, and he took upon himself never to sleep more than 4 hours a night. Never to sleep more than 4 hours a night. And he did whatever he could. There were nights he stayed up all day. The Cherina Rav writes in the Akdama to Olam V'Trufa, Reb Nosson's letters. He said, if anyone ever saw the way Reb Nosson davened in the morning, you would think that all his energy was put into davening. But if you ever looked at him during the day when he said Tillim, you would think that all Reb Nosson did was spend his energy and time in saying Tillim. But if you ever saw Reb Nosson sitting and learning, you would think that all Reb Nosson did was sit and learn. But if you ever saw Reb Nosson writing letters to his Talmidim and his son, Reb Yitzchok, you would think that all Reb Nosson did was stand and sit and write the whole day. If you ever saw Reb Nosson composing his tefillas or writing his chidushim, you would think that's all he ever did. And if you ever saw Reb Nosson speaking to people, giving them his chaskas and his service and how to come close to Hashem, you would think that's how he spent all his time. So now we just listed, I think, 8 different things that Reb Nosson did that you would think that every one of them has spent all his time on that. And he did every one of those things every single day. The Rebbe told him, you should be mechadesh dvar Torah every single day. And he said it was difficult. There were times that it flowed. There were times that I had to squeeze it out of my tiny pinky. I had to squeeze out a chiddush. But I squeezed it. I got it. The man was awesome. He writes that every second that you lose is lost. You ever hear of the expression killing time? Did you? I got some time to kill. Did you ever hear that? Right? Whose life are you killing, if not your own? You're killing time. It's your life. Reb Nosson was careful not to lose a second. Everything he did was with dvekis to Hashem. Right? Hashem is infinite. Hashem could provide those infinite koiches for you to be able to utilize every second of your day. Who created time? Hashem. It's a Gemara in Chagiga. The 24-hour days that we know were created the first day of creation. The Gemara says. So that time is from Hashem. If you realize that blessing that we have of the time that comes to us from Hashem, then we know that we have tremendous koiches and we could really accomplish a tremendous amount every single day. That was Reb Nosson. Right? That was Reb Nosson. Right? I know when I wrote Through Fire and Water, so I had to write the book. It's a biography. When I did it, I felt I was living with Reb Nosson every single day, because I was. I mean, I had to take the subject, which was Reb Nosson, and put it down on paper, and work it out that it's right, and this is correct, and this is, it has a source and whatnot. So I did all that. And the days that I worked on the book, I was there in the office quite early, and I worked through the day. I didn't go home. I didn't go out of the office except for davening or whatever. I would take a bite maybe, but I wrote the whole day. The only reason I went home at night was because I couldn't focus on the screen anymore. Everything was blurry. So I went home to sleep. I slept. I came back in the morning. It was like when you're living with Reb Nosson, you can't waste time. Yeah. The book was written in 4 months.
Wow.
Right? From when I started writing the book till I finished, 4 months. And you can't waste time with Reb Nosson. You can't. It's automatic. Right?
Imagine the research leading up to those 4 months.
That took a year. That took a year. I would do it on my travels, not during what I was working on, but when I would be on a plane or a train or wherever I was, I would have one of the Sfarim with me, and I would highlight, this belongs in a biography, this belongs... The book finally came out. It's in English, in Hebrew, in Spanish, French, and we just completed the translation into Russian. And what we need are 2 things. One is financing for the balance of it, but also we need the time to the editing and moving the book. But it's ready to come out, in maybe a year or maybe.
French and Spanish is published already?
Yeah.
What was the biggest nisayon that Nosson had? Even though there were quite a few.
What was the biggest nisayon of Reb Nosson? It's hard to say. There were quite a few. Quite a few. One of them would certainly be in the beginning of his kavus to the Rebbe. Reb Nosson was born into a Litvische family, a Misnagid family. When he got married at the age of 13, his father-in-law was Reb David Tzvi Auerbach, who was considered one of the greatest poskim of that generation, a tremendous goy. He was also a Misnagid. And Reb Nosson felt he's missing something in life. So he started looking and searching, and he went to various Hasidim, various Rebbes, various Tzaddikim. And the Batitchev Rav was one of them. He saw Talmidim of the Rebbe Reb Zusha, that he saw they made a bracha with such kavanah. He says, how do you get that kavanah? Right? That was Reb Nosson. He was jealous that they had this kavanah and this feeling of the Rebbe, of their Rebbe, of Hashem. Reb Mordcha of not Neschus. Reb Mordcha of Kremenitz was one of the very big tzaddikim. His father was a very close talmid of the Baal Shem Tov. And he started traveling to these Hasidim, to these Rebbes, to these tzaddikim. And he felt improvement. But it didn't speak to him that this is where my life, how I'll be able to change. The Rebbe, when his Talmidim came to him, they first came, the Rebbe said to them, confess. The Braslev were called the Vidanikas. Confess before me. So they were a joke by all the other tzaddikim, by all the other Hasidim. And when Reb Nosson came to the Rebbe, and he became a Braslev, now Reb David Tzvi, who's one of the greatest tzaddikim in the generation, has to live with a son-in-law, Vidanika, a confessor, Braslev. What's going on here? It was very hard for him. And he had a lot of opposition. Eventually, his father threw him out of the house. Threw him literally. In those days, no, his father. His father was also a Musnagir. In those days, you got married, you lived in your parents' house or your in-laws' house. Right? He lived in his parents' house. His father was wealthy. He had room for him. Everything was fine. His wife was demanding a divorce. And his father-in-law was passing through. Reb Nosson was already kicked out of the house. And his wife was demanding a divorce because she didn't marry a chassid. She married a Musnagir. Right? But you see, there's a drop of emes by everybody. Sometimes you even realize it. Winston Churchill used to say that everybody stumbles over the truth. 98% of the people pick themselves up and keep on going. Yeah? Even the Goy said something like that. The Cumara says, Chochma b'goyim tam. So that was, his father-in-law came to town, to Nemerov, where Reb Nosson was, because he was the chief rabbi of that whole area. So he passed through the town. And his wife Reb Nosson's wife complained. What do I do with a husband like this? So he asked her, is he still learning? Because Hasidim didn't learn in those days, right? Is he still learning? She answered, he learns double, treble what he used to learn before. Reb David Tzvi, Zechrono Livrocha, heard that, and he said, by such a husband, you want parnasa? You should sit in the marketplace and sell salt, but bring him parnasa so he can sit and learn more. And that's how some of the machlokas went down. Reb Nosson stayed during that period at his grandfather's house. Eventually, his father made a certain kind of parnasa where Reb Nosson would have money for it. And Reb Nosson lived on that for about 8 years until his father's business went bankrupt. But that was one of the biggest nisyonos. And he came to the Rebbe again and again and again. The Rebbe said to him, to you we have to say, Shalom Aleichem Tzeichem L'Shalom. He says, as soon as you come, you better get home because there's trouble, Sorry. So that was Reb Nosson's early year or two when he was by the Rebbe. Very, very big nisayon. But I don't know if that was his biggest nisayon. He went through, call it a living hell, when he went through the years of oppression, Yemei Atlois. Reb Nosson went through 4 years of terrible oppression from the different Hasidim, especially the Savrana Rebbe at that time. But they wanted to kill Reb Nosson. They hired someone to kill him. He killed a different Reb Nosson in town. But he did kill somebody else who was named Nosson. They tried to get the authorities to banish Reb Nosson to Siberia. And they did a lot of other things like that. Reb Nosson still remained steadfast in his work in the Rebbe's thing. Reb Nosson said, in a way, it's a shame we don't have any money. If I had 10,000 rubles, I would buy up the government and these guys would not touch me. But he didn't have it. But they went against Reb Nosson. They tried to bury him. They tried to kill him. They tried to banish him. And Reb Nosson said, my only eitzah is tefillah, is to pray to Hashem for a Yeshua. God forbid that I should be the Roidev and not the Nirdav. Nirdav, the Medrash in Emor, Parshas Emor says, there's a pasuk in Koheles, Elokim Yivakesh es Nirdav. Hashem seeks the one who is pursued. So the Gemara, the Medrash there says, I can understand if a Russia pursues a tzaddik. I can understand if a Russia pursues a Russia. But what if a tzaddik pursues a Russia? What if the tzaddik pursues a tzaddik? He says, understand, says the Medrash, that Elikim Yivakesh is Nirdov. Hashem always seeks the one who is pursued. The Medrash there is talking about why Shor or Kesef or Eiz ki Yivoled. What animals are accepted on the Mizbeach? An ox, a sheep, or a goat. Not a predator, a wolf, a mountain lion, or whatever, a bear, or anything like that. Only a nirdaf, somebody who was pursued. And that is what Reb Nosson said, I will remain. He had somebody, he knew the maskilim, the Enlightenment. The heads of the Enlightenment in Russia were very friendly with Reb Nosson. They met the Rebbe when the Rebbe was still alive, and they remained very strong friends with Reb Nosson. And they said to Reb Nosson, if you want, give us the word, and in 24 hours you won't have any opposition. And Reb Nosson said, God forbid that I should be the Roidef and not the Nirdaf. And that was probably, I would think, the biggest nisayon that Reb Nosson had. I don't know for sure. I hope I'll get the chance to ask him. But that's where I'd have to analyze it. He had other problems, other difficulties, but I don't know if they stood out as much as that. Question?
Is the choice? Have current. Whenever the Rebbe says something, he got more das.
Yes.
This
Well, we mentioned earlier.
Yeah. We need a very we need to be a very healthy nefesh to be in control, to understand when we got their own das and when we receive das. Everybody can do that.
Could everybody do it? I doubt it. But you have to understand, Reb Nosson was a genius. You see it from his writings, right? To be such a genius and yet give up what you think is right in order to follow what somebody else is telling you is right is a very different story. You have to have a tremendous amount of self-confidence that you believe that what you're doing is right, even though it's not you. It's somebody else. But it's something that's ma'asim b'chol yom. We get up in the morning and we say Moida'ani and we start davening. Where did that come from? Is that what you want? Or is that what you learned from others? This is how you're supposed to conduct yourself. Right? It's that same kind of mentality that you take and you use for your own life. That I heard this, I understand this is right, and I do it. Right? You give up what you would like to. I mean, most of the world, they get up in the morning, they'll maybe take a shower, maybe not, they'll wash their face, they'll brush their teeth, and they'll go sit down by breakfast to eat ham and eggs or whatever it is. That's most of the world, right? A Yid is not that way, which Reb Nosson points out in one of his halachas. Patience is built into the Yiddish neshama. You got to get up in the morning, you got to put on talis and tefillin, you got to daven. Some people learn a little bit before that. You want to go eat. Finally, I mean, you're up for a couple hours, you want to eat. First you got to wash your hands, then you got to sit down and make a mutzi, and then you can first eat. Right? There's a certain kind of direction that's put into us from child-wise that we grow up with, that we should be able to come and recognize Hashem in whatever it is that we're doing. Right? Reb Nosson was bright enough, brilliant enough to be able to understand he heard these certain things from Rabbi Nachman. This man has what to tell me, to what to do. And therefore I'm willing to put aside everything, every preconceived notion that I may have in order to be able to grow in Avodas Hashem. Right?
It means everybody have it to a certain point and you can build it up.
You can build it up, yeah. The Rebbe said, I want to make from you tzaddikim like me. If you didn't have it, you couldn't make tzaddikim like him. So everybody has it. But you have to be able to know how to build it, how to receive it. Can I ask you a question? We have these preconceived, we grow up this way. I mean, this is our lives. Now, 150 years ago, a kid went to cheder, right? The parents brought the kid to cheder in the day. He sat and learned with the Rebbe, and he came home. Today, that's not enough. It's not enough. Today we have to have report cards, right? Where did that come in? In the old days, a Rebbe taught the kids, and if you didn't understand it, he taught you again and again until you understood it. Today, it doesn't matter if you go to school, you don't have to know everything. So you won't get 100, you get an 85. So what? You're an 85 student, right? Don't you know what destroyed or what is destroying the school system today? Right? You're not allowed to be yourself. You have to fit into a preconceived notion of what it means to be a student in yeshiva. Right? You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know what the Rebbe taught today. Right? So you'll be a 90%, a 92%, an 86%. What difference does it make? But there's a preconceived notion when we go, we have children, we send them to school. Where does that come into Yiddishkeit? Right? Right? If we would all rebel, right, maybe there won't be yeshivas or schools, but the kids would learn. The kids would learn. They'd come out of yeshiva knowing something. Right? Now, you can publicize that in the Muncie Times that I said that. I'm not worried about my reputation some other time. I'm not worried about it. But think about it. There's preconceived notions that this is the way it works. No, it's not the way it works. It's not. It's not. Reb Nosson was smart enough to understand that he was 22 years old. Boki and Shas and Poiskin. Right? There's something missing in my life, and it's got to be filled. And then you wouldn't have so many kids going off the derech. You wouldn't have all the problems that you have with drugs and alcohol and other things. I was at a wedding once. There's two, it was a Litvish wedding, so whatever. But there were two boys there sitting opposite me at the table. And there's a bottle of Johnny Walker or whatever it was, I don't know, Shivas Regal, which I never touched the stuff, right? Baruch Hashem, I had a good Rebbe when I was a kid. But I never touched the stuff. I have good parents too. But these kids, one was 14, one was 16, and they're polishing off a bottle of liquor. Mishoma kozois. Miro ka'ela. Where did you see that? It's a preconceived notion that when you go to a wedding, you're allowed to drink. Right? Chazal talk against that, right? They talk against drinking. Right? Well, so there you go. Reb Nosson said once, he said, there's a minute today, in his time, that a guy sleeps with a bottle of schnapps under his pillow. He wakes up and Mashiach is not here yet, he drinks again. Right? Reb Nosson didn't hold from that minhag. Reb Nosson held you sleep with a tillum under your pillow, maybe, or something else like that, but not that you sleep with a bottle of whiskey. But what do you have so many kids drinking today? Right? Does that belong in the Yiddish culture? No. No? What was the good? We just had Hanukkah. Did you ever think about it? There was exile, Golus Bovel. They went to Babylon. Golus Persia, Paras and Modai. We are now in Golus Edom, right? We're spread around the whole world. What was the Golus Yovan? What was the Golus Yovan? The Jews were in Eretz Yisrael. Where's the exile? Right? Where's the exile? Golus, the Rebbe says, is not that we're spread out among the nations, because Hashem is everywhere. Right? The Golus is when you incorporate Goyish mentality into your thinking, like a report card, or like other things like that. There are certain standards that we live by, right? Shidduchim, what goes on with Shidduchim? Someone told me recently, I just heard this recently, you have to have a resume. Did you hear these things? A resume? You give it over to Rebbeinu Shalom, you check out the family. Are they good or not good? A resume. You went to school here. You got this one. Rebbeinu Shalom. What happened to Klal Yisrael? I understand there's a shidduch crisis here in the States. Is it true? Yeah? I know we have it in Eretz Yisrael, so shouldn't be too much different here. Rebbeinu Shalom. This is what Yiddishkeit is all about. Do you eat the bottom here for the top here for the chicken? Right? Do you use a white tablecloth on Shabbos? Right? Anyway, all the different things, the Goyish mentality that has creeped into Klal Yisrael is what Golus Yovan is all about. 2 days ago, we had Cheshvan. The Gemara says, Talmai, the Egyptian king, was geyser on 70 tzaddikim, the Shivim Zakanim. They should each go into a separate room, no communication. Remember, there were no cell phones or faxes or anything, right? Each one sitting in a separate room, translate the entire Torah into Greek. When it was translated, the Gemara says it was such a terrible tragedy that Choshech descended upon the world for 3 days. Okay? Gemara, right? Okay. If you learn Chumash Rashi, in the beginning of Parshas Devarim, right in the beginning, Vayichtav Moshe es HaTorah bar heitev. What is bar heitev? Rashi says b'shivim lashon. The Torah was already translated into Greek. So what's the big deal that Talmai ordered it to be done into Greek? He took 70 Zakanim, he separated it. The Ruach HaKodesh that our Chazal had was so great that there were certain parts that they had to change, because Talmai would have destroyed the Torah otherwise. But they had to change it, but they changed it, each one changed it the exact same way. Right? 70 Zakanim sat in different rooms, and each one was masig that in order to translate this, that he doesn't destroy the Torah, has to be done in this way. Okay? By the way, just somebody once told me, that's not a big miracle. 70 Zakanim and the Ruach HaKodesh. He says, if you would have put them all in the same room, and they came out with the same translation, that would be a mess. But okay. The point is that when you're dealing, what was the big tragedy? Moshe Rabbeinu already translated the Torah to Greek. Right? The tragedy was that it was forced into Klal Yisrael by the Goy. The Goy took the Torah, he says, you will translate it so that I approve of it. That was the tragedy. It's when we accept the Goyish mentality and we incorporate it into Yiddishkeit, then we have all the troubles we have. That's what Rabbeinu Zal said, that the Golis that we're in today is a Golis, it's a state of mind. It's a state of mind. If you're with Hashem 24/7, Reb Nosson was with Hashem 24/7. The Baal Shem HaKodesh, the Rebbe, they were with Hashem 24/7. Yeah, they lived in tzoros and whatnot. But Hashem was with them all the time. They recognized this is all Miyad Hashem. Reb Nosson was very strict about Mנחem Tolchina, especially that anything that the Goyish government decreed against the Jews, he said it's all because of a gzeira from Shemayim. It's got nothing to do with the Tsar and all that. He's just a tool. He's just like a stick. Hoy Ashur Shevet Api, Yeshaya Hanavi says. The main thing is that we have to take Yiddishkeit and look at Yiddishkeit the way it's supposed to be. That's what Reb Nosson felt from the Rebbe. This is what the message of Hashem is all about. And therefore, he became Reb Nosson. He was able to take anything the Rebbe said and give you an entire Torah. Kutei Moharan is 1 volume. Kutei Halachos is 8 volumes. Where did it come from? And it's all the Rebbe. You look in the halacha, Reb Nosson goes back and forth, and he comes out with incredible chidushim, right? But he always goes back to the Rebbe. And that's how he was able to do what he did. Okay?
You described before,
Mm-hmm.
he had certain discernments, he had certain challenges, and the way he internalized everything. He took what נחman said and he internalized it and he grew it up. In today's generation, which has all these problems with the female, people don't give a damn. Today you hear of a Torah, you hear of a challenge. Never, I don't know, a house burned down in Flatbush last week, 3 kids, a mother died, everything. Oh, never, it's terrible, it's terrible. We're going for sushi tonight. People don't care anymore. How do you? I don't either. For me, it's a steak. But how do you take what they did then and bring it into today? True, we have these problems today. Everybody, we took on the going, we took on the report cards, and every kid has to fit into a mold. And so now, we're living in a.
There was a tzaddik who passed away a little over 200 years ago. His name was Rabbi Nachman of Brestlev. He tried then, and he's trying now, to give us tools how to overcome that. When a tragedy like that happens, there's something we have to do, right? A few years ago, there was something happened in Toronto. I forgot what it was. But one of the people there said to me the same thing you're saying now. What happens then? So we had a Yom Tefillah, and everybody came, and everybody said Tillim, and they all walked home. Right? Where's the Yisroirus? Where's the arousal to Hashem? That's what Rabbeinu Zal wanted, and that's what Reb Nosson did in the Likutei Halachos and the Likutei Tfilos. Right? I have a couple of friends. We've talked about learning the Likutei Halachos. It's not easy. It's not that hard. Reb Nosson's language is very easy to understand. It's very easy to follow. But among us, we discussed the fact, and I say fact, that if you sit with a Likutei Halachos for, let's say, a half hour, 45 minutes, right, and just concentrate on those pages that you just studied, you will find that you're in a different world. You're not part of this world. You're a different world. It takes you time to come back out of that state. Reb Nosson brings you to such a moichen de gadlus that's incredible. Right? I'll give you a little different example from another side. Maybe it's nearly 40 years ago. Nobody here looks old enough to remember back 40 years. Most of you weren't even born then. But whatever. I taught in the yeshiva Dvar Yerushalayim. It's a yeshiva in Har Nof, Baal Tshuva. And I was mashgiach there at night. I used to give shiurim during the day, and I was mashgiach for the night seder. And boys would come over and talk to me about their problems and whatnot. One guy was there. He ran away from home because he came home one day from school and found his father hitting his mother with a hammer. You know, and there were a lot of guys like that. In those days, it was the beginning of the Baal Tshuva movement. There were other stories I can't tell you. You don't want to know from them. If you heard them, you'd flip out altogether. But, you know, you're a mashgiach, so you become a confidant, and people tell you some of the most miserable and disgusting and horrible things that happened in their lives. And you speak to the boys. Most of them didn't have such a terrible, but there were quite a few. There was one kid, his mother died in childbirth with his younger brother. He was 2 years old, so he never went out of the house. The father allowed it to happen. And he was like 25 years old. He was then first, his father sent him to Israel. He should go to psychologists and whatnot. Whatever. I mean, horrible stories, what happened to people. So you can only talk to the boys so much. You can only explain to them so much. What I would do after a while of knowing this boy and knowing how far he can go, I would bring him over to the bookshelf in the Beis Medrash, and I'd show him a set of Likutei Halachos. And I would say, here, 8 volumes from Reb Nosson of Braslev. Pick any volume you want. Okay, they choose any volume. Then I tell them, now open up to any page you want. Not that I'm doing anything. You do it. You pick out the page that you want. They pick out the page. I said, now point to any paragraph you want. They point to a paragraph. I said, okay, let's go sit down and study it. We would sit down and study that paragraph. And then I would look at the kid and I would tell him, tell me if that paragraph wasn't written for you or not. Doesn't that paragraph cover all the things that you were just talking to me about before? Do you hear that? You understand what's in the page of Likutei Halachos? I'm sorry. You understand, you know what's on a page of Likutei Halachos, that you can open up anywhere and you can find something that will talk to you and tell you how to get through this little problem. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Try it. You'll like it. Try it. It'll work. You'll see. And I didn't do it only once. I did it several times with several of the boys. You didn't need it. But you may need it now, but you didn't need it. Anyway, whatever it is, these are things that Reb Nosson did. The greatness of Reb Nosson was because he set himself aside from whoever he was to become the student of the Rebbe. Look at that. Wow. Look at that. Look at this service. Everybody, you should have a big Yeshua for everything that you need.
Amen.
Look at that. Anyone here of Moshe Kramer, a big Breslever, and he's not related to me, so you don't have to worry. But he's one of the big leaders in the Breslev movement in Eretz Yisrael. We were talking once about illness, And we're talking of the powers of tea. Tea can really help anybody. Everybody uses tea. So he said, tea is only good, it's only effective if you put a pill inside it. You have to put a pill inside the tea in order for it to become effective. Right? This is how a Braslev Chassid thinks. Because in Hebrew, how do you say tea? Tay, right? Tough and hay. And how do you say pill in Hebrew? Pill. Pei Yud Lamed. If you take Pei Yud Lamed and put it inside tough and hay, you have tefillah. That's how a Braslev Chassid thinks. And that's because of Reb Nosson. Okay. Because of the Rebbe, naturally, but that's how we think. Right? Good, huh? So now you can always drink tea. Any questions? Huh?
Did he say anything on coffee? No.
Well, kaveh is called kaveh el Hashem.
Right.
It's automatic. Any questions? Anything about Reb
We'll get 2
Nosson?
more questions. Just take a break. Have some tefillah.
No, it's all right. I have a hearing. There's quite a few that are just mind-boggling. Tefillin halacha hey.
Tefillin?
Halacha hey.
Okay.
Or matana halacha hey. Or arayv halacha gimel. Or dvar mayotzim menachai dalet. Or ribis hey. These are long halachas. They're so powerful.
I just want to start somewhere. I know the beginning is always the best place to start. I just want something to give a strong, ignition.
Try Orev Halacha Gimel. It's a Chosh Mishpat Chelik Zayin. Chosh Mishpat Chelik Aleph.
I have to look it up. Alright. Chelik Gimel. Halacha Gimel. Okay.
The laws of the guarantor.
Also, I wanted to know, my father wants to know if he could see you, Shia Rappar.
Yeah, I don't know my schedule.
Do you know where you're staying for Shabbos?
Yes. I know Rabbi Berg, who passed away.
Yeah.
I'll be at that shul for Shabbos.
Do you know are you staying by the Safrans? Do you know which family? Is there any time or place tomorrow that he might be able to? Okay.
Possible.
Is there? Can he maybe reach you on the phone or something? Or I think I might have taken your number last time.
Talking about
But
it was only that travel that after Wednesday we went home to each other. She was at home because it was before Bishop. I was very broken. I was crying. I opened up for you, so Muslim rights that people go home, they eat chum, Shabbos, and they drink beer and they're all drunk, and then they come to shul and they embarrass people.
Can I take your number?
914.
Yeah.